You wake up before the sun, your fingers already aching from yesterday's work. There's soot on the window pane and chill in the air, the kind that slips between the cracks in your boots and climbs up your spine. No alarm clock, just the factory whistle. It screeches across the rooftops like a banshee that doesn't care if you slept 4 hours or 14 minutes. And no, you don't get a snooze button. Hey there, love. Before we roll back history's heavy iron doors, tell me where you're listening from and what time your clock says. I'm always curious who's tuning in, blinking into the quiet, just like you. And if this kind of bedtime dive into the dusty corners of the past brings you peace, go ahead, like and subscribe. Only if you mean it, though. No pressure. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lace your boots tight, because if they come undone, you could trip and on the factory floor. The fall isn't just embarrassing, it's dangerous. You grab a crust of bread, still dry from yesterday, and tuck it in your apron for later. Breakfast isn't a meal, it's a maybe. By the time you reach the gates, you've already walked 3 miles, dodging horse manure, soot puddles, and the occasional rat, who's somehow better fed than you. The air shifts when you step inside. Heat radiates from the machines. They hiss and clank in a language only metal understands. You take your place by the loom or the press, or maybe the spindles they all blur together eventually. You're here for 12 hours, 6 days a week, and sometimes 7 if the foreman's in a foul mood and production's running behind. Your hands move fast. Faster than the machine, ideally. Slow down and you might jam it. Jam it and you might get docked, pay or worse. A girl last week lost the top of her thumb. She screamed for a moment, then fainted. No one stopped the line. You're 14, or maybe 17, or maybe 35, but you look 52. Age is relative here. The lines on your face form early and your back curves long before it should. The oil that slicks the machines now lives in your pores. You smell like iron and sweat and something you can't quite name. Historians still argue whether early factory life liberated women from homebound roles or just shifted the chains from one room to another. But in this place, under the relentless groan of steam engines, it's not a debate, it's exhaustion with a side of blisters. Here's a mainstream truth. By 1850, women made up over half the textile workforce in Britain, and similar numbers followed in the U, soup, and parts of Europe. It wasn't because they loved the work. It was because they were cheaper to hire than men and didn't yet demand unions. And that brings us to one of the quirkier footnotes of industrial life. Some women wore sharpened hat pins not just for fashion, but for self-defense. When the foreman got a little too close, a quick jab could remind him she wasn't made of gears and leather belts. The steam hiss never stopped. You time your bathroom breaks carefully if you get one. There's no formal schedule, just opportunity. And even then, privacy is a joke. The lavatory smells like boiled cabbage and despair. And someone's always knocking on the splintered door before you've even unhitched your skirt. You don't wear gloves, they slow you down. You don't wear earplugs because no one's invented them yet. At least not for workers. You don't speak much. Shouting over the machinery means lost breath. And besides, talking could be mistaken for slacking. The foreman's eyes are everywhere. Or rather, his mustache usually gets there first. And then there's the noise. You think you'll get used to it? You won't. It drills into your dreams and hums behind your ears, even on your day off if you get one. Years later, when you're old enough to sit on a porch, assuming you live that long, your ears will still ring. Some call it cotton tinnitus, though no doctor writes it down. Your lunch break, when it comes, is brief. You chew your bread slowly, not because it tastes good, but to make the moment last. You sip water from a shared tin cup and try not to think about whose lips touched it last. Cholera's going around again. You pray the bread crust scraped off the germs. A few girls laugh in the corner. It's a light, high sound out of place in the clamor. One has a ribbon tied in her hair. Where she got it? Who knows? A touch of beauty in a room that forgot softness. At the end of your shift, your body sags like a damp dress on a washing line. But the walk home awaits. And maybe a second shift, caring for siblings, scrubbing floors, patching clothes, cooking if there's anything to cook. The coal is almost out. The candles are half-wicked. You save the matches for emergencies. You sleep in your work clothes. There's no reason not to. The bed is small. The room smaller. And you share it with at least one sister, and maybe your widowed aunt who also works at the factory. She used to hum lullabies. Now she just coughs. Tomorrow it starts again. The soot. The steel. The scream of machines. You may never own much. You may never travel far. But you carry something with you, resilience layered between cotton threads, stitched beneath your collarbone, quieter than steam, but stronger than iron. You're a factory girl in the industrial age, and somehow you survive. You press your fingers against the calluses forming on your palms. They feel like old buttons hard, smooth and strange. But you don't complain. That's just what happens when your life goes from the gentle spin of a wooden wheel to the shriek of mechanized spindles. You remember your grandmother's stories, how she used to spin thread in a sunlit cottage. A cat curled at her feet and birds chirping from the window. It sounded like a fairy tale then. It still does. You don't get sunlight anymore. You get oil lamps, dusty skylights, and thick factory air that tastes like metal. When you look up, it isn't to daydream, it's to make sure the belt over your head hasn't slipped. Because if it has, it might snap. And if it snaps, you better hope it doesn't whip your face or catch your hair. The machines are fast now, inhumanly fast. They don't pause. They don't forgive. You feed cotton into their mouths like a sacrifice, and they spit out miles of thread without ever saying, "Thank you." This is what progress looks like. Louder, sharper, and a whole lot meaner. By the mid-1800s, spinning and weaving, once gentle, homebound chores were transformed into factory labor for millions of women. You don't get to sit by a fireplace and hum as you work anymore. You stand for hours, shoulders locked, eyes fixed, hands moving so fast your brain stops keeping track. And yes, the pay is dreadful. You make half of what the men make, even if you do double their work. Historians still argue whether women in the textile mills were passive victims or subtle resistors. But when you tie a rag over your mouth to keep the cotton dust out of your lungs or hide a small blade in your bodice just in case you don't feel like a victim, you feel like a survivor with flair. Quirky fact time. In some mills, to keep up morale, managers hired violinists to play during long shifts, a kind of industrial soundtrack. Imagine threading bobbins while someone tries to drown out your exhaustion with a slightly out-of-tune jig. Inspiring. Right. Except most of the time, The music couldn't compete with the clatter of iron gears and screaming foremen. You develop a rhythm. That's the only way to get through it. Hands. Pull. Twist. Thread. Hands. Pull. Twist. Thread. You stop thinking about pain. You stop thinking about anything except the next second. You can't afford distraction. A single snag could mean tangled yarn, lost hours, or worse, a mangled finger. You see it happen more than once. The girl next to you pulls her hand away too slowly. The needle pierces clean through. She doesn't cry. She just stares, lips pressed shut. Blood drips on the cotton like an accidental dye. Your break is barely long enough to exhale. Someone passes you half a biscuit. You nod your thanks. It tastes like dust and too much air. But you chew it slowly, savoring the illusion of a pause. Your spine throbs. Your eyes itch. The belt above your head squeaks once, then twice, like it's thinking about snapping. And through all of it, you're expected to remain modest, clean, cheerful even. Society still tells you to be ladylike. Hard to do when your corset is sticking to your skin with sweat and your petticoat smells like last week's socks. You've got grease on your sleeves and blisters on your feet. But sure, let's all pretend you're a porcelain doll. Some girls decorate their machines ribbons, photos, scraps of bright fabric, tiny rebellions, a little color to make the place feel less like a prison. You smile at the thought. It's either that or scream. Then there's the endless lint in your lungs. It floats in the air like fog. If you cough too hard, the foreman glares. If you stop working, he yells. The doctor says it's mill fever. You say it's the price of progress. When the day ends, and end is a generous word, you walk home half asleep. The factory whistle sounds behind you, marking time like a sad trumpet. Your muscles ache in places you didn't know had muscles. Your fingers twitch even when you're not touching fabric. Sometimes you forget how silence sounds. Your little brother meets you at the alley near your building. He's barefoot, scabbed, and grinning. You're late, he says. You tousle his hair. You're always late. Dinner is porridge, and not the sweet kind. You don't eat fast. There's no rush anymore. You let your thoughts drift. You picture the wheel your grandmother used, the rhythm of it, the calm. And for a brief moment, you let yourself pretend you'll inherit that life instead of this one. But deep down, you know better. That world is gone. You sleep that night with cotton dust in your nostrils and the phantom noise of machines still humming in your ears. You dreamed once of being a teacher, or maybe a seamstress with her own shop. Those dreams now live behind your eyes like paintings in a museum. Beautiful, distant, untouchable. But you keep going. Because you must. Because even in this steam-filled cage of iron and lint, you are something the machine can never be. Human. You get home just after dark. Shoulders dragging. Apron streaked with grease. Cotton lint clinging to your hair like tiny ghosts. The street outside your tenement is muddy, narrow, and crowded with voices, a baby crying in one window, a drunk man shouting in another. Somewhere down the alley, a dog barks like it's trying to start a conversation. You don't answer. You step around a puddle that may or may not be water and push open the crooked door to your flat. And just like that, your second shift begins. No, you don't get to rest. Factory life might break your body, but home life demands the rest of you, your patience, your tenderness, your strength. You pull off your boots, stretch your aching toes, and roll up your sleeves. Again, there's laundry in the tin basin that needs scrubbing, a potato stew that needs reheating, and a 6-year-old brother who can't sleep unless you hum the same lullaby every night, even though you forgot half the words years ago. You don't complain. Who would listen? Dinner is thin stew and thinner conversation. Your mother, if she's still alive, sits quietly in the corner, her hands shaking too badly to sew anymore. You sew instead, patching holes in socks or mending seams on shirts that have survived too many winters. Candlelight flickers over your needlework. It feels old-fashioned, almost sacred. The domestic task, the feminine ideal, except now. It comes after a 12-hour industrial shift. Historians still argue whether this dual burden of labor and domesticity marked progress or punishment. But let's be honest, when you're washing clothes in ice-cold water with cracked red knuckles, the debate feels a little pointless. You know, one thing for sure. Rest is not a word that applies to you. Still, there are moments. Quiet ones. You tuck your brother into bed and whisper a joke about the soot-faced chimney sweep down the street. He giggles. You grin. That sound, the pure, silly laughter of someone not yet burdened, is worth more than gold. Then you sit by the window, darning socks, watching lantern lights blink in the dark. You think about the other women on this street, in other flats, doing the exact same thing. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. Quiet, invisible laborers in homes that never sleep. The quirky tidbit for tonight. In many working-class families, women earned just enough in the factories to buy sewing machines on credit. These machines, usually kept in the home, became nighttime tools for piecework. You'd sew shirts, undergarments, or lace sleeves for pennies per dozen, racing the clock until your eyes gave out. And heaven help you if you turned in imperfect work. Factory inspectors didn't tolerate loose threads. You tried to make it stretch. The pay from your day job barely covers rent and bread. The coin you earn from piecework might buy candles or a bar of soap. Maybe, if you're feeling bold, you save it. You dream of getting ahead. But life always finds a way to snatch it back, a sick child. A hole in the roof. A funeral. There's also your reputation to maintain. You can't just walk through the streets in your work clothes without someone muttering. Women are expected to keep neat appearances, even when those same appearances cost more than you earn in a week. Heaven forbid your hem is torn or your blouse too tight. Judgment moves fast in neighborhoods like this. So you scrub your blouse by hand, press it under the mattress to flatten it, and stitch up tears with thread thinner than your patience. You do this not for fashion, but for dignity. Because in a world that chews you up for being poor, a clean collar can be your only defense. Sometimes, if you're lucky, a neighbor stops by with a slice of leftover pie or a bit of jam. You sit together by the hearth, gossiping about factory rumors and sharing stories. Someone swears she saw a rat the size of a cat. Someone else heard the foreman's getting replaced. It doesn't matter if it's true. These stories keep you human. They remind you there's more to life than steam whistles and broken needles. You get to bed around midnight. Your fingers ache. Your back throbs. But your brother is asleep, and the socks are darned. You close your eyes and count how many days until payday. You always know the number. A gentle cough escapes your chest. You ignore it. Probably nothing. But deep down, you know the mills have a way of settling in your lungs and never quite leaving. Your dreams come in flashes, spools of thread. Flames licking at factory walls. A basket of laundry tipping into the street. You wake before dawn, startled. The candle burned out hours ago. The room smells like boiled starch and iron. Another day begins, and so it goes. Factory by day, home by night. Always moving, always mending. You are part of a quiet army of women who hold the world together with thread, sweat, and soft lullabies no one else hears. You don't get statues. You don't get parades. But in the half-dark of history, your hands are everywhere. The first time you see the inside of a mine, it takes your breath away, not from awe, but from the thick, choking air that clings to your lungs like a jealous ghost. There's a dampness down here that seeps into your bones, and a darkness so deep it feels like being swallowed. You aren't supposed to be here. Not really. Underground works for men, they say. But when your father dies in a shaft collapse and your family needs bread more than rules, you descend without blinking. You're not alone. Girls barely older than 10 climb down wooden ladders, skirts tucked into their bloomers, hands clutching coal picks. Some are hurriers, pulling carts of coal along narrow tracks with a harness strapped around their foreheads. Others are trappers, spending 12 hours in pitch black, opening and closing ventilation doors to prevent gas buildup. That's your first job. You sit in the dark, alone, all day. Your ears do the seeing now. It's not glamorous. It's not even survivable for long. But it's work. Historians still argue whether women in the mines were heroic contributors or tragic anomalies. You roll your eyes at that. If keeping your siblings fed is tragic, then call you tragedy's favorite child. Eventually, you get moved topside into the sorting sheds where coal dust coats every inch of your body and gets so deep into your nostrils. You taste it for weeks. You wipe your mouth, and your sleeve comes away black. You laugh. So much for that pale Victorian complexion the magazines go on about. Here's your quirky fact for the night. Some mining women in the 19th century carried brass tokens tied to their corsets or boots. If they died in a collapse, the tokens identified the body. You carry one now, your initials etched with a sewing needle. You never take it off. But let's say you weren't in the mines. Maybe your family nudged you into something safer, a clerk job. Or maybe factory bookkeeping. Sounds genteel, doesn't it? A clean desk, a quill pen, tea breaks. But then you get there, and the office is just another engine. This one runs on sweat, ink, and gossip. You're expected to wear a clean blouse every day, white, preferably with a brooch at the neck. Never mind, you only own 2 blouses and one is missing a button. You learn to fasten it with a hidden pin and pray no one notices. Office girls are the new show ponies. Pretty handwriting, prettier faces, and perfect posture even when your corset ribs dig in deep. There's always a manager watching. Correct your grammar, he says. Smile more. You wonder how many smiles it takes to earn a raise. You never find out. Raises go to men. Always. But let's not forget your maid days if you were lucky enough to land one. Scrubbing someone else's silver. Folding sheets you'll never sleep on. Serving tea you'll never taste. You polish marble floors while your boots fall apart. You make their beds and pray no one notices the tear in your only petticoat. You pour bath water for a woman who complains it's too cold, too hot, too something. You imagine dunking her head in it just once, just for the thrill. Still, you survive it all. And once in a while, there's a moment, a golden sliver of absurdity that lightens the weight. Like the time you tripped carrying coal, spilled half a scuttle across the foyer, and the master's prize Pomeranian ended up with a sooty mustache. You laughed until you hiccuped, then got docked pay. But you didn't care. That tiny rebellion tasted sweeter than jam. There's a rhythm to every job you do, whether it's the clink of coal, the scratch of a fountain pen, or the swish of skirts down the manor halls. You find your place in it. You become part of the machinery without becoming just machinery. And that's your quiet miracle. Night comes again. Your hands throb. Your back feels older than your grandmother. You lie awake thinking of new ways to stretch your wages. Maybe take in laundry from the neighbor's cousin. Maybe sell ribbons at the market on Sundays. Maybe ask about that position at the newspaper office. Even if they'll laugh, even if they'll say it's no place for a woman, you'll ask anyway. Because you're more than soot and service. More than some angel of the hearth embroidered on a sampler. You're a worker, a fighter, a dreamer, even when no one's watching. The first time you scrub a chamber pot, you're 11. You don't know whether to gag or just breathe through your mouth like the older maids do. Either way, there's no escaping it. This is the job. You're a maid now. Not the kind with frilly aprons and witty banter like in the penny novels. You're the kind who rises before the family wakes and collapses long after they've gone to bed. Always silent. Always invisible. Always polite. You live in the attic, just beneath the rafters. In a room that leaks when it rains and bakes when it's hot. You share it with 2 other girls, Margaret, who talks in her sleep, and Bess, who cries when she thinks no one's listening. The bed creaks. The blankets scratch. But you're grateful. It's cleaner than your old neighborhood. And for the first time, you've got shoes without holes. Your mornings begin in total silence. You slip from bed, wash with cold water, and tie your hair into something vaguely respectable. Then the routine begins. Fires to stoke, boots to polish, bread to slice, and water to carry bucket after heavy, splashing bucket, up and down narrow stairs that seem to get longer every day. You memorize every creak in the floorboards. You learn which doors groan and how to oil the hinges without being asked. You move like a ghost, a shadow, a soft blur in the corner of every room. That's the goal. If they notice you, you're doing something wrong. Historians still argue whether domestic service offered women respectable employment or reinforced strict class hierarchies. You know this much. When someone throws up at dinner and you're the one scrubbing it from the carpet while they laugh at the table, it doesn't feel all that respectable. Let's brighten things with a quirky tidbit. Some Victorian households insisted their maids walk backwards out of a room so they'd never turn their back on the master or mistress. Backwards. In a petticoat. Carrying a tray of porcelain. It's amazing more teacups didn't die, tragic deaths. The work is endless. Dusting, folding, boiling, chopping, scouring. You learn to chop onions so fast, you don't even cry anymore. You know how many steps it takes to get from the pantry to the dining room, 32. How long it takes to toast bread to golden perfection, 7 minutes. And how to iron lace without singeing it. answer. You don't lace is evil. There's a hierarchy. Of course, the cook is God. The butler is next. Then the lady's maid, who gets to handle silks and perfumes while you get coal and cabbage. You're the bottom rung. The scullery girl, the kitchen whisper, the broom's best friend. But sometimes you catch a glimpse of another world. A flash of jewelry on a wrist. A perfume that smells like roses and sugar. A book left open on a chaise. You pause, just for a moment, to read a single line. Then the headmaid shouts your name, and you're off again, trailing soap suds behind you like a comet. You're not allowed to speak unless spoken to. You say yes, miss and no, sir and never. Ever express an opinion. You once said you didn't like veal, and the master looked at you like you'd confessed a murder. You save your pennies. Secretly, tucked into the lining of your boot, behind the loose stitch only you know about. You dream of buying a new blouse, maybe a novel. Maybe if you dare to dream big, a train ticket out of here. Somewhere far, somewhere less beige. One night, after the mistress throws a tantrum because her bath water is too tepid, you step outside to catch your breath. The stars above are faint, but they're real. You lean against the wall, apron damp, hands cracked, and look up. I could be more than this, you whisper. Just once, just to see how it feels. You return to your chores with that sentence echoing inside you like a bell. You aren't bitter. Not exactly. Bitterness is a luxury. You are simply tired. Quietly. Deeply tired. But you also know your worth. And that knowing, that flicker of pride, is what carries you through spilled soup, burned toast, and condescending glances. You fall asleep each night with your apron bunched under your pillow, because it's the softest thing you own. And even as your hands throb from scrubbing and your knees ache from kneeling, you let yourself imagine a different ending. One where you're not the maid in someone else's story, but the writer of your own. The room is too hot. The air clings to your neck like syrup, thick with sweat and the sting of chemicals. The sound of needles punching through cloth becomes your lullaby and your curse. You sit shoulder to shoulder with a dozen other girls, each hunched over a sewing machine that trembles when you push it too hard. Welcome to the sweatshop. There's a fan in the corner. It doesn't work. There's a window on the far wall. It's nailed shut. There's a fire exit. They locked it last month because someone was sneaking out for fresh air. The message is clear. Breathe less. Sew more. Your boss, Mr. Klein, paces behind you with a cigarette always half lit. Ashes dropping on the floor like snowflakes made of nerve. He doesn't shout unless something goes wrong. The silence is worse. When he stops behind your chair, watching, tapping his knuckles on the wooden table, you feel your breath go shallow. Today, you're hemming sleeves for blouses you'll never wear. Frilly things with satin trim. Destined for women with silk gloves in parlor rooms. You measure carefully. Snip fast. Sew faster. A crooked seam means docked pay. A dropped needle means time lost. And time lost is food lost. You're paid per piece. Which means the faster you sew, the more you earn. In theory. In reality, it's a race against your own body. Your fingers cramp. Your shoulders burn. Your eyes blur until you're not sure if you're stitching fabric or dreams. Here's your quirky tidbit. In some sweatshops, Girls would secretly sharpen their sewing needles into makeshift lockpicks, just in case the exit was bolted during a fire. You've heard whispers. You've seen the scorch marks on the ceiling from that blaze 2 years ago. You keep a pin in your shoe, just in case history repeats itself. Historians still argue whether women in these shops were victims of exploitation or agents of change. But you know this? No one who survives a 12-hour shift in a heat-choked room filled with noise, pressure, and fear is just a victim. Your hands are fast. You've memorized the feel of fabric, the rhythm of stitching, the hiss of frustration when a machine jams. You can thread a bobbin in under 30 seconds, even blindfolded. Not that anyone's impressed. They don't reward skill here. They reward silence. And you've learned to be quiet. Lunch break is 15 minutes, if you're lucky. You eat in the alley out back, perched on an upturned crate between 2 bins. One of the girls brought pickled cabbage. Another passes around a bruised apple. You all eat fast, talking with your mouths half full. One girl, Rosie, whispers that she wants to run away, start her own shop. She's good with patterns, better than any of the supervisors. You nod, encourage her, knowing full well she won't. The rent's too high, the world too wide, and fear, like fabric, has a way of wrapping around your dreams and stitching them shut. You return inside. The floorboards creak. The oil lamp sputters. The room smells like sweat, dust, and desperation. The fans still don't work. The window still doesn't open. You hum a tune under your breath, something soft, almost forgotten. The girl beside you joins in. For a brief moment, the noise of the machines feels like a rhythm you control. But then Klein barks. Get back to work. The song dies. You keep sewing. Your skirt rides up your knees as you work. But you don't fix it. Modesty only gets you so far. You're more concerned with the bleeding cut on your finger from a broken needle. You wrap it in thread and keep going. The machine doesn't stop. Why should you? You finish 50 sleeves by the end of the shift. Your eyes ache. Your back spasms. You leave the factory with thread stuck to your cuffs and oil on your chin. The sun has already dipped behind the rooftops. Another day gone. Walking home. Your feet drag. You pass a bakery and breathe in the smell of warm bread. You smile. You won't buy any. But it's nice to smell something that isn't burnt fabric. At home, your younger sister greets you with a tin mug of watered-down milk. You share a crust of bread and listen to her read from the old school book you haven't touched in years. She stumbles over the words. You correct her gently, quietly proud. Maybe she won't end up in a sweatshop. Maybe she'll end up in a real school. A real future. You fall asleep at the table, your head resting on folded fabric meant for the next day's shift. Your dreams are twitchy. You see machines chasing you, needles growing like thorns. You wake up with a gasp and the taste of lint in your mouth. You stretch, breathe, and rise. Another day waits. Another room too hot. Too loud, too full of pain, but you walk toward it anyway. Because you're not just surviving, you're creating something stitch by stitch, life by life, thread by unbreakable thread. You're not a factory girl anymore. You've traded the sewing floor for the picket line. It's loud here, too, but the noise is different. No more machine clatter. Now it's chants. Boots on cobblestone, the scrape of painted signs held high. You're marching, shouting, sweating, but this time, the fire in your chest doesn't come from exhaustion. It comes from rage. And just like that, you become part of something bigger than a paycheck. It starts small, a whisper in the hallway, a rumor that someone walked out after being slapped by a foreman. Another girl refused to work through her fever. You nod along. Then one morning, you arrive at the factory gates. And there's Rosie, yes. That Rosie standing with a sign made from an old petticoat nailed to a stick. No pay. No work. You freeze. The others do too. You could step around her. You could keep your head down. But something in your stomach twists. And before you know it, your fingers are wrapped around the handle of the broom you brought for sweeping, and you raise it like a flag. By noon, 40 women have joined. By sunset, it's over 100. That's how it began. With a bit of cloth and a whole lot of stubborn. You become a match girl again, but not the kind who sells little sticks on the street. You become one of those match girls, the ones who walked off the job at the Bryant and May factory in 1888. You've read about them. How they fought for safer conditions after their friends lost their jaws to phosphorus poisoning. Fossy jaw. They called it your teeth fall out. Your skin rots. And eventually, your bones glow in the dark like something cursed. Romantic. Right. Historians still argue whether the Match Girls' strike was the spark that ignited the British labor movement or just a flicker in the dark. But to you, it's gospel. It proved that even barefoot girls with singed fingers could make the world tremble. Your sign reads, "We are not machines." A bit dramatic. Maybe, but true. The newspapers mock you. Girls with dirt under their nails demanding dignity. One headline jeers. Another calls it a parade of hysterics. You laugh. You've been called worse by your supervisor. The quirky tidbit tonight. One match girl, a teenager named Sarah Chapman, became so respected during the strike that she was invited to speak at Parliament, with a corset on. Imagine standing before those powdered wigs with soot on your apron and revolution in your lungs. It's almost poetic. Your own strike lasts 6 days. It rains for 5 of them. You shout anyway. You organize food donations. Pass out pamphlets. Dodge the occasional tomato thrown by a man who swears you're ruining the economy. And comfort the girl who bursts into tears because she's down to her last coin. You start seeing each other not just as co-workers, but as comrades. Margaret, who once elbowed you for the last spoon at lunch, shares her bread. Bess sews a new hem on your skirt when yours tears mid-march. You laugh together in the downpour, chanting until your throats are raw. And then, a miracle. The factory backs down. A tiny raise. Slightly shorter hours. Promises of ventilation. It's not everything, but it's something. You celebrate that night with burnt tea and cold potatoes. And it tastes like victory. The next morning, the whistle blows again, and you return to the floor. It's still hot, still crowded, still unforgiving, but your sign is tucked under your bed now, and that changes everything. You're no longer just a cog. You're a woman who walked out and walked back in, standing taller. You notice more things now. The girl at the end of the line whose cough never stops. The way the new supervisor skips over your name when reading bonuses. The fire escape still chained shut for safety. You start writing things down. Names. Dates. Wages. You're keeping a log. It feels dangerous. It feels right. And you talk more. Not just whispers now, but full conversations. About the union forming down the street. About the woman who held a protest outside City Hall last week. About the pamphlet slipped into your coat pocket that said, "What if we stopped apologizing?" You read it twice, maybe 3 times. Later that month, a journalist shows up asking questions. The bosses panic. They tell you not to talk. But when he walks up to you in the alley, notebook open, pen poised, you speak quietly, clearly, not with rage, with truth. "My name's Eliza." You say, "I make 4 shillings a week. I've stitched blood into sleeves and I've swallowed dust that'll outlive me. But I'm still here, still sewing, still singing." And the journalist writes it down. You go home that night lighter than usual. No raise, no reward. Just the feeling of being seen. Not bad for a girl with a borrowed apron and a borrowed name. You'd never call yourself political. Not out loud. That's a word for men in waistcoats and women in velvet salons sipping sherry while debating whether poor people deserve boots. But politics finds you anyway sneaking in between your bread crusts and cold feet, showing up in the soot-black corners of your day. It starts with a leaflet left on the factory bench, folded like a secret. On the front, a woman in a plain dress standing tall before a crowd. No halo, no crown, just conviction. The title reads, "Votes for Women." You turn it over. It's in your language. Not polished, not fancy, just clear, strong, loud, even when silent. The next week, you go to the meeting. It's held above a fishmonger's shop, the room perfumed by yesterday's haddock. There are 20 of you, most younger than 25. All squashed onto benches meant for school children. The woman speaking isn't what you expect. She's got mud on her shoes, a crooked tooth, and a voice that could carry across rooftops. She says, "They won't give you the vote because they're scared you'll use it." That hits you like a slap and a hug all at once. Historians still argue whether suffrage movements truly represented working-class women or just spoke about them from a distance. But when you leave that room, pamphlet clutched in your hand and fire in your belly, you don't feel like someone's project. You feel like a fuse. You keep your pamphlet hidden under your mattress, tucked behind a loose brick, even sewn into your corset lining once. It feels like a holy relic, not because it's delicate, but because it reminds you what's possible. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some suffragettes hid protest messages inside loaves of bread. Smugglers. No, just women who understood that kitchens were battlegrounds. 2. Who knew that a message disguised as a crust could travel farther than fists? Your first act of defiance is small. You add your name to a petition with your real signature. Not an X. Your hand shakes. You haven't written your name since school. But there it is, black ink and all. Mary Elizabeth Tanner. Not the girl in the back. Not the one who never speaks. Just you. Soon, you start skipping your tea break to attend organizing meetings. You learn to argue softly at first, then louder. You stand on a crate outside the post office one Sunday and shout your truth to passing strangers. Some boo. One man throws a bun. It hits your shoulder and falls to the ground with a squish. You pick it up, dust it off, and take a bite. Next time, make it fresher. You yell. The crowd laughs. You win that round. You're not alone. Your friends come too. Margaret, who once cried over a broken sewing machine, now carries chalk to scrawl slogans on brick walls at night. Rosie paints banners with old bedsheets and red dye that stains her fingers for days. You all start walking with straighter backs. The risk grows. Your foreman hears rumors. He warns you. You're here to sew, not to stir trouble. You smile. We're good at both. That week, your pay mysteriously shortens. You expected it, still stings. Then comes the real test. A march. Hundreds of women pouring into the square, dresses swirling like storm clouds. Banners high, boots loud. You're near the front. Your sign says, more than wives, more than workers. Women. A police officer shouts. The crowd shouts back. Someone throws a rock. Then someone else. Chaos blooms fast. You don't throw anything, but you don't run either. A hand grabs your arm. You twist free. Another pushes your shoulder. Suddenly you're on the ground. Skirt torn. Knee bleeding. One shoe missing. And all you can think is, this hurts less than silence. You limp home that night with a blackened eye and a heart full of thunder. Your sister stares. Did you fight someone? She asks. You grin. The whole world. The bruises fade. The fire doesn't. You join a letter-writing campaign. Learn names of politicians like their local villains. You stop apologizing for your voice. Stop whispering in case someone hears. Start speaking so that someone has to. No, you're not political. You're just done waiting for permission to matter. It's winter now, and your breath fogs the inside of your scarf as you walk to work. Boots leaking through soles patched twice over. Snow crunches underfoot. But it's not the soft kind, it's the city kind, mixed with coal dust, ash, and whatever else the wind carries. You tighten your coat, fingers numb but still moving. Always moving. You arrive early today, not for ambition, but warmth. The workhouse kitchen where you help prepare food is one of the few places in this city that stays halfway warm in winter. Your hands may go red with cold scrubbing potatoes, but at least they won't freeze stiff like they did last week. This isn't your job. It's your other job. After a full day at the sewing factory, you volunteer here in the evenings. Just a few hours. Just a bit of help. You tell yourself it's temporary. But now it's been 6 months. And they call you Miss Mary like you're someone important. You smile every time you hear it, even if you're still scrubbing soot from cauldrons or chasing rats from the pantry. The workhouse smells of boiled cabbage and sadness. Children stare with hollow eyes. Mothers clutch tin bowls like holy relics. One man hasn't spoken in days, just hums an off-key lullaby under his breath. You keep chopping. Keep serving. Keep smiling when you can. Historians still argue whether Victorian workhouses were instruments of charity or punishment. You've seen enough to know the answer is probably yes to both. Your quirky tidbit. In some London workhouses, mothers were forced to separate from their children upon entry, even babies. A rule designed, they said, to discourage laziness. As if losing your home wasn't punishment enough. You've watched that separation happen twice. You still hear the screams in your dreams. But there's hope here. 2. Strange. Flickering hope. You meet a woman who can fix shoes better than any cobbler. A boy who memorizes Bible verses backward just to keep his brain sharp. A girl who steals an extra biscuit not for herself, but for her grandmother. You learn names, share stories. Sometimes, when the food is ready, you serve with flair, presenting each bowl like it's a 5-course feast. You get laughs. You get gratitude. You get crumbs of joy. And you realize you don't volunteer here just to feel warm. You do it because even in the bleakest places, you still believe in comfort. Then one night, a woman named Elsie stumbles in, soaked through, barefoot in the snow. You help her sit, wrap her in an old wool coat, offer her the last bowl of stew. She eats like she's swallowing fire. Later, she presses your hand and whispers, "You're a good soul." No one's ever called you that before. It sticks to your ribs. You start spending more time here. Less sewing, more serving. You learn how to stitch wounds as well as cuffs. How to whisper calming words to a child shaking from fever. How to boil herbs when the apothecary won't help those kinds of people. You never went to nursing school, but now you're the one they call when someone collapses. The one who ties makeshift bandages and cools burning skin with rags soaked in vinegar. Your factory hands become healers' hands. The woman who runs the kitchen misses. Hale starts teaching you things. How to stretch a loaf for 20 mouths. How to clean with ash when soap runs out. How to keep records that make sense to nosy inspectors, but still hide the fact you fed twice as many people as they approved. She trusts you, and that means something. You start dreaming again, not of parlors or petticoats, but of your own kitchen. A real one, maybe even a shelter. A place where no one gets turned away because they've lost their job or their name. You don't say it out loud. Not yet. But it simmers under your skin. Of course, not everyone is pleased. Your factory supervisor grumbles that your outside distractions are affecting your performance. A neighbor sniffs that good girls don't meddle with the workhouse folk. You stop apologizing, start nodding politely and walking faster. One Sunday, a wealthy lady visits. Charity board, silk gloves, a voice like porridge. She watches you work and says, "It's sweet how much you care." You smile tightly and think, "This isn't sweet. It's survival." She leaves. You stay. And that's the difference. That night, Elsie takes your hand again. "You know what you are," she says. "You're the warmth in the walls." You laugh. And for once, you believe her. You still work long hours, still go home tired. But now, the tired feels earned. Like a badge, like something holy. You aren't just making a living anymore. You're making meaning. By now, your fingers know more languages than your tongue. They speak with soap and stitches, with broom bristles and chalk sticks. They've told stories in hymns and healed wounds in silence. And now, they learn ink. You've started writing, not poems, not love letters, something stranger, more urgent. Little essays, observations, letters to no one. Or maybe letters to every woman like you who doesn't yet know she has a voice. It begins late one night after work, when your back is sore and your eyes are too tired to sleep. You find a scrap of paper, an old biscuit wrapper, actually, and you write, "My hands hurt, but I still made 20 coats today." It feels silly. But the next night, you do it again. Then again, soon. You're writing whole pages. At first, you hide them. Then you show Rosie. She laughs. You're a writer now. I guess I am. You say, and it feels impossible, but also right. Historians still argue whether working-class women shaped the public discourse or were merely written about. But here you are, ink under your fingernails, proving them wrong in every paragraph. The quirky tidbit tonight. In the 19th century, some laundresses in Paris used to tuck secret poems into their wash buckets and swap them with other women along the river. They called it l'eau douce, sweet water. Quiet resistance between starch and steam. You read that in a book once. It stuck with you. You start copying your thoughts into a small journal, then slipping pages under bakery doors, behind church hymnals, into coat pockets on the train. You never sign them. Just leave a tiny symbol at the bottom, a spool of thread and a flame, something ordinary and dangerous at once. Then, someone replies. It's a note, folded carefully, tucked into your coat pocket one rainy afternoon. Just 4 words. I heard you. Write more. Your chest nearly caves in from the shock of it. Not because someone read your words, but because someone needed them. After that, the writing comes faster. Your words spread. People talk. You hear someone quote one of your lines at a workhouse dinner. We carry more than baskets, we carry each other. You nearly drop your ladle. Someone begins calling you the ghost quill. It's half joke, half legend. No one knows who you are. That's the point. But then the newspaper happens. One day, a small radical paper, the Workers' Flame, publishes a letter titled On the Quiet Power of Women. It's your words. Exactly. You never sent it. Rosie did. She grins. Unapologetic. I didn't sign your name, but they want more. You panic for a full day. Then you sit down, take a deep breath, and write again. The articles don't just describe suffering. They describe solutions. You write about the heat in the sweatshops, about locked exits, about the mothers who starve themselves so that children can eat. You write about kindness to the girl who gave away her boots, the widow who mended shirts for strangers. And you write about yourself, carefully, honestly. You stop pretending to be small. Of course, not everyone approves. Your landlord hints that he's seen your name in some questionable places. Your supervisor threatens to fire you. Your aunt says you're asking for trouble. You smile sweetly. Trouble tastes like truth now. And the truth spreads. You're invited to speak. You decline. The words aren't for stages. They're for doorsteps and dinner tables and cold factory benches where no one thinks to leave a voice behind. So you keep writing and keep leaving your scraps. Some in coat pockets. Some hidden in loaves of bread. Some pressed into the bindings of borrowed books. You meet other writers. 2. Women with inky thumbs and stories of their own. One sews verses into fabric linings. Another leaves quotes on laundry slips. Together, you create a chorus soft, persistent, impossible to silence. Then, one bitter January, a new law passes. Something about moral conduct in printed materials. They say it's to stop obscenity, but everyone knows it's aimed at you and those like you. Your friends go quiet. Even Rosie flinches. You keep writing anyway. That week, you leave your words inside the factory walls. They can't outlaw our thoughts. It's found. The manager's furious, but he can't prove it's you. You go home shaking, but proud, because by now, you've realized something. Words are just another kind of work. They build, they bind, they break walls. And your hands, they've done every kind of labor there is. Now, they write. The letter arrives on a Monday, folded into thirds, crisp and official looking. It bears the mark of the town council, and for a second, your stomach flips with worry. Did someone report you? Was it the factory pamphlet? The shelter ledger you forgot to adjust. But when you unfold it, the words make your jaw drop. They want you to join the local relief committee. Not as a cook, not as a cleaner, as a voice. You read the sentence 3 times. They want your opinion. You blink, unsure whether to laugh or faint. Just a few years ago, you were scrubbing chamber pots and hiding protest signs under your mattress. Now, you're being invited into rooms with carpet and chairs where women are allowed to speak without raising their hands. Sort of. You show up to the meeting in your cleanest dress, still patched. Still plain, but pressed neatly, and walk into a room full of men and 2 other women. Everyone looks surprised to see you. One man coughs. Another says, "Ah, yes, the volunteer." You smile, biting your tongue. They ask you about poverty relief. You tell them about the child who fainted from hunger last week, about the widow who's been boiling orange peels to make broth. They nod politely, then change the subject. Still, you don't stop speaking. The chair of the committee, a stout man with a mustache that moves when he talks, suggests new rules to reduce dependency. You raise your hand. What about increasing bread rations? He blinks. I'm not sure that's practical. You raise it again. What if we added fuel allowances for homes with infants? Silence. The woman beside you coughs. The man across the table writes something down, maybe your name, maybe a complaint. You raise it again. They don't vote on your proposals, but they also don't dismiss them entirely. You call that a start. Historians still argue whether women's presence in local governance changed policy or just softened its face. You think of the coal-smudged child sleeping in the church vestibule last night. You think of him warm. That would be change enough. Quirky tidbit for tonight. In 19th century Glasgow, a group of washerwomen once stormed a council meeting with baskets of damp laundry to protest water rate hikes. They stood dripping in the aisle and refused to leave until the vote was overturned. It worked. You don't bring laundry to your next meeting, but you do bring receipts. Actual ones. From the workhouse kitchen. You lay them out like weapons. This is how far we stretched 3 pounds of potatoes and 1 pound of beans. You say, and we still ran out. No one argues. Afterward, one of the older women misses. Franklin, who wears her shawl like a crown, pulls you aside. You did well, she says. Keep pushing. It's the first time you've been mentored by someone who owns more than 2 pairs of gloves. You start attending more meetings, not just council ones, but gatherings in basements and borrowed rooms where women plan soup kitchens, clothing drives, school supply swaps. You organize one yourself, a night kitchen for mothers who work late shifts. You call it the lantern room. You hang an old lantern outside the door each evening. A symbol, a signal. Soon, other women come with their own ideas. A literacy circle, a cloth exchange, a childcare corner in the church basement. None of it feels revolutionary, but all of it matters. You're not the loudest voice in the room. Never have been. But when you speak, people listen now. Not always, but enough. Enough to make you stay. And yet, power's a strange thing. It sits awkwardly in your lap. Like a child, you're not sure how to hold. You still go home to a one-room flat. Still patch your socks. Still wake up before sunrise. You're not above anything, just within more than you used to be. One night, while sorting donations, a teenage girl hands you a crumpled note. "Thanks for making space," it says. That's it. No name. Just a thanks. You keep the note in your coat pocket. Whenever the council talks in circles, whenever the men say you're being too emotional, whenever the vote goes the wrong way, you press your hand to the paper. And remember, space is sometimes the most radical thing you can give. You used to think changing the world meant marches and shouting and newspaper headlines. And sometimes it does. But other times, it means staying in the room, sitting at the table, asking the hard questions. Even when no one wants to answer, you're sitting in the back of the room again, but this time, not because you're supposed to be invisible. You're choosing it. Back row. By the window. So you can watch who comes in. So you can take notes and whisper encouragement to the nervous girl beside you. You've become what they call a quiet leader, which is just a fancy way of saying you know how to listen. The room is buzzing tonight. Folding chairs scrape. Voices chatter. Someone hands out oat biscuits that taste like dust and good intention. It's the first meeting of the Women's Cooperative Guild in your borough, and you're one of its founding members. Imagine that. A cooperative. A guild. The words still feel large in your mouth, like trying on someone else's shoes and realizing they fit. You helped gather the names. Helped book the hall. Helped find the woman brave enough to stand at the front and welcome everyone. Her name's Joan. She has 2 missing teeth and a voice that slices through chatter like a knife through butter. Our lives are work, she says. So let's make that work count. A murmur of approval. You look around. It's mostly mothers, some factory girls, a schoolmistress, a washerwoman, a midwife, a girl with ink on her fingers who used to write your quotes in chalk on alley walls. Every one of them tired. Every one of them here anyway. The guild isn't just a place to talk. It's a place to build. You pool money into a common fund. A little each week. Enough for emergency shoes, a funeral bouquet, a birth basket. One woman tears up when she receives a bundle of baby linens 2 days before her due date. You realize that a gift like that isn't small. It's salvation. Historians still argue whether cooperatives empowered working women economically or simply added another layer of responsibility. You know that argument doesn't matter when a mother buys milk with a shared coin. Your quirky tidbit. One guild in Yorkshire once used its pooled funds to send a delegate to speak in front of the Prime Minister. She carried a letter signed by over 1,000 laundresses, housemaids, and seamstresses. They said, "We cannot pay taxes without flour in our cupboards." Not a single signature belonged to someone with a title, just hands that scrubbed, stitched, and stirred. At your guild, you start a wall of hands, a painted mural where every member dips her fingers in pigment and presses her print. Reds, browns, grays. It starts as decoration. It becomes a vow. You organize your first group letter next about wages. Not just yours. The women's wages in the bakery, the fish stalls, the paper mills. You draft it carefully, in the longhand you've sharpened over late nights. When it's ready, each member signs with pride, not an X. The guild sends it to the mayor's office. No response. So you send another, and another. Then you show up in person. That day. You wear your nicest shawl and speak without stuttering. We've earned this. You say, we're not asking. He looks flustered. You consider it a win. Then comes the real triumph. The shared kitchen. One of the members inherits a tiny storefront. You all clean it. Paint it. Scavenge for pots and pans. You hang a crooked sign in the window. Warm meals. Clean floors. Open hands. The first customer is a boy no older than 10. He pays in buttons. You give him stew anyway. No one questions it. By month's end, the kitchen feeds 50 a day. There's no menu. Just whatever can be made from donations and leftovers and a whole lot of grit. But the food is hot. The table is long. And no one eats alone. You still work your factory shift. Still help at the workhouse. But the guild becomes your rhythm, your refuge. A place where your voice doesn't echo into silence. It meets others mid-air. You lead workshops now quietly. Of course, you teach how to read a receipt, how to spot price gouging, how to boil scraps into broth and anger into letters. You watch women shift, straighten, step forward. They stop apologizing. That's your favorite part. You don't see yourself as a teacher. Not really. Just a woman who's been through the fire and came out holding a kettle. But when the girls call you Miss Mary with a grin and ask for advice on everything from flower prices to landlord tricks, you feel it, that slow blooming pride. Not flashy. Not loud. Just steady. Like the mural of hands. Like the fire in the hearth. Like the walls you're helping build with brick after invisible brick. You used to dream of escape. Now you dream of expansion. Not leaving this place. Making it better. They're calling it a new age. Newspapers trumpet the dawn of progress. Of industry. Of a modern world humming with invention and motion. But for you, modern still means hauling water in buckets, elbow deep in soap suds, checking bread loaves for weevils. The world might be changing. Yes, but only for some. Still, something's shifting. You feel it. In the factory's quieter corridors. In the questions your sister asks about science. In the new machines arriving by cart and pulley, wrapped in cloth like sacred relics. Electricity is creeping into the city, one lamppost at a time. At night, you walk home and look up not for stars, but for light bulbs. You feel half hopeful, half forgotten. Your sister brings home a newspaper clipping one day. "Look," she says. "They're offering classes for women. In bookkeeping, typewriting, machines." You scoff at first. You don't need another job. You need better pay at the one you have. But later that week, curiosity tugs. And by the next month, you're sitting in a classroom, holding a stubby pencil and blinking at a chalkboard that says, "Office Work for Women. The Future of Industry." It's your first class in over 20 years. You're older than the other girls. They whisper and giggle and roll their eyes at drills. But you take notes like your life depends on it. Because maybe it does. Historians still argue whether industrial education opened doors for women or simply moved them into new forms of servitude. But when you type your name on a borrowed Remington and see it, Mary E. Tanner, bold and clean in black ink, you don't feel like a servant. You feel like a witness. Your quirky tidbit. In the 1890s, some typewriters were built specifically for women's hands, marketed with floral decals and pink ribbon cases. The companies called them lady machines. You roll your eyes now. But back then, it meant you were allowed to touch the future. You finish the course. You don't become a secretary too old. They say, but you do teach others. The guild adds a skills table to the kitchen. Typewriters, ledgers, sewing machines. Women gather on Tuesdays to practice. You lead the sessions. One night, a girl named Ada asks if she can bring her brother. He's 12, she says, but he doesn't know his letters yet. You hesitate, then nod. By week's end, 4 more boys are showing up. You make them read recipes aloud as practice. They groan. You make them write shopping lists. They protest. You smile. Progress, after all, isn't just a railway or a light bulb. It's teaching someone to spell flower instead of flower. Your own sister, now 16, dreams of being a clerk. She practices at home on your borrowed typewriter. Fingers flying. One afternoon, she types out a sign. Women run this room. You tack it to the wall. Leave it there. Technology begins appearing even in your neighborhood. Electric lights outside shops. A telephone booth down the street. It's thrilling. It's eerie. You touch the smooth black receiver like it might bite. You don't love it all. The gramophone is too loud. The new printing press smells of oil and arrogance. But you learn, you adapt. You keep your voice. You write an article for the workers' flame. The new world still needs old hands. It's published without edits. They ask you to write again. And so, you find yourself caught between centuries. One foot in colon corsets, the other in cables and keys. And you realize that's exactly where you belong. Because it's not about escaping the past. It's about stitching it into the present so the seams don't tear. By now, you're what the girls call one of the wise ones. They don't mean it with mockery. It's more like reverence laced with affection, like you've become part folklore, part lighthouse. You still work, still walk the same cobbled streets with the same mended boots. But your shoulders carry more than groceries now. They carry trust. It's not because you've done anything dramatic. No grand speech from a balcony. No courtroom trial. No medals. It's quieter than that. But somehow, in this little patch of the world, you've become someone people look to when the world bends too far sideways. You're not alone. The other women of your generation, scarred and smiling. Tired but tenacious, they're building something. 2. It's not a revolution in the books, but it's happening in flour sacks, letters, and kitchen meetings. You call it the long thread, the way women weave strength through daily life until it becomes a kind of armor. And one day, without fanfare, the mayor announces a new public initiative. Free breakfast for school children. It's not enough, but it's more than nothing. It's something you sit with your fellow guild members and let yourself feel the win, just for a moment. Historians still argue whether such grassroots efforts changed national policy or were merely local kindnesses mistaken for progress. But when you see a child eat a full bowl of oats for the first time in days, you don't care which paper writes what. You just care that his cheeks are pink again. Your quirky tidbit. In one English town, women volunteers once disguised themselves as beggars to document how many people were turned away from shelters each night. They turned the numbers into a report, marched it straight to Parliament, and forced a debate. The disguises were itchy. The report, effective. You smile every time you remember that. You've taken to wearing an apron with extra pockets now. Not for spoons or sewing kits, but for folded papers, pamphlets, letters, notes from girls who want advice or want to help or just want someone to say yes. It's hard, but yes, you're still standing. Your little corner of the world is changing. The streets are lit at night. The post office has a woman behind the counter. A girl you taught last year is now teaching her own class in a church basement. You even hear whispers, quiet, reverent ones, that someone nominated you for a civic medal. You snort when you hear it. For what? Knowing how to cook soup for 60. But deep down, it touches something tender. One Tuesday evening, a woman you barely know approaches you after a guild session. She's clutching a notebook to her chest, like it's breakable. "I want to start a reading circle," she says, voice trembling. "But I don't know if I'm smart enough." You take her hand. Smart enough to care. That's all you need. And you mean it. Because the truth you've lived is this. Intelligence isn't just books or lectures. It's noticing who's hungry. It's tracking coins in your head like a ledger. It's surviving, remembering, repeating, teaching. One night, you sit by the fire with your sister, now grown, sharp-tongued and clear-eyed. She asks if you ever regret not leaving the city, not marrying, not chasing something bigger. You think about that. You remember the silence of the sweatshop, the chants of the march, the ink stains from your first published piece, the lantern you lit every night at the kitchen door, the guild's wall of painted handprints, and you shake your head. No, you say, "I didn't chase something bigger. I built it." The words surprise even you. She leans her head on your shoulder. "You always were the strongest person I knew." You laugh, soft and low. "I just stayed standing longer than most." That's all. And maybe that's everything. It's raining today. The soft kind that feels like mist and memory. You walk slower now, not from weakness, but from awareness. The cobblestones you used to dash across are old friends, worn smooth beneath your soles. You nod at the bakery girl who waves from behind her counter. She's barely 20 and already running the shop. You remember when she was small enough to cling to her mother's skirt in the workhouse queue. The city's changed. Not everywhere. Not perfectly. But enough that you can feel it. There's a new public hospital. A free school for girls. Street lamps lit by wires instead of gas. A woman now serves on the town council. And the guild. It's not just in your boroughs anymore. It's in 3 neighboring towns. With more to come. They still meet in kitchens. Still serve tea and share bread. But now they draft proposals and send delegates to conferences. You joke that it's starting to feel too official. Secretly, you're proud. They still call you Miss Mary. Even though your hair's silver and your back aches in the rain. You let them, There's comfort in being known. Tonight, you're back at the lantern room. You don't run it anymore. That task's passed to a young mother named Lillian, who moves with a kind of practiced chaos, juggling pots and conversation without missing a beat. You sit by the hearth, your apron folded in your lap. You don't need to do anything. You just are. A girl sits beside you, 17, maybe 18, nervous. You recognize the way she picks at her sleeve. "I read your words once," she says. "The ones about bread and dignity." You nod. She takes a breath. "I want to do something. I want to help, but I don't know where to start." You smile. Not because it's funny, but because it's familiar. You've already started. You say, "The wanting is the beginning." Historians will still argue, of course, about whether this era truly liberated women or merely shifted the burden, about whether the cooperative model ever scaled, about the role class played and who got heard. You've lived long enough to know the answer doesn't matter as much as the question. What matters is the girl next to you burning with purpose. What matters is the boy in the soup line who leaves with full hands. What matters is the mural of hands still growing on the guild wall. Your quirky tidbit for this last night. Some early guild chapters used to end meetings by singing lullabies, not for children, but for each other. Grown women, humming together in kitchens, soothing the bruises the world gave them just for existing. Not weak, not sad. Sacred, you hum that melody now, softly, as the girl beside you leans against your shoulder. Around you, the room glows with quiet motion. Tea kettles whistle. Children laugh. A woman teaches another how to draft a budget with colored pencils and patience. And somewhere behind it all, your first words whisper back to you. We are not machines. No, you never were. You were builders, dreamers, caretakers, fighters. You are the quiet revolution. And tonight, you can rest. You close your eyes, not from sleepiness, but from fullness. You listen to the fire crackle, to the spoons clinking in mugs, to the soft chatter of futures being formed. You did not leave a legacy carved in marble. You left it in open hands and stubborn hearts, in every woman who believes her voice is worth hearing, and in that slow, persistent courage that rewrote the world. You're still here, breathing soft, head heavy against the pillow. The world we just walked through is behind you now, still echoing. Maybe in the corners of your thoughts. That soft creak of factory floorboards. That whisper of paper between fingertips. The distant laughter of women sharing stories in warm kitchens. Let that all drift now. Let the weight of it roll off your shoulders, like rain sliding down a window pane. You've seen how small moments, just one pair of hands, one piece of bread, one quiet word can begin to shift history. You've seen that strength isn't always loud. It isn't always brave in the obvious ways. Sometimes it's just showing up, day after day, choosing kindness, choosing dignity, choosing each other. Let that truth settle into your chest like a warm coal. You are part of that same thread, stretching back and forward through time. You carry it, whether you know it or not. So, as the lights dim further and your breath slows, remember this. You don't need to be anyone but who you already are to matter. You don't need to march or write or feed a city unless you want to. You just need to care, to notice, to keep holding your small piece of the world with love. The women who came before you are proud. They're with you now, in the silence, in the stillness. And tomorrow, well, tomorrow will come. But tonight, you can rest, sleep well. Soft heart, you've done enough for today. End of script. Sweet dreams.